Hello everyone. Hello everyone. My name is Esther, and today we are going to look at Unit 401, and it's an overview of what we have covered so far. We started our journey by understanding ourselves, the role of a teacher or a facilitator, and you have different responsibilities, different issues that you have to look into. For example, legislations and the syllabus and the timings, everything, from the point where you start the planning to the point where you deliver, you assess, and you evaluate the program. Now, we have done identifying learners' needs, and that included the learner need and the learning needs. We have started that process, and currently we are looking at now planning, the planning stage. Remember the cycle that we were given by the writer of the book, that is Anne Gravels. Yeah, so if you have this textbook, it's a very good flowing book to guide you topic by topic on what we are covering. So we are on Unit 401. We have covered Unit 301. That's the one that was on roles and responsibilities. And then 311 was the starting of Unit 401. So one of them is at level 3, the other one is at level 4, and both of them deal with planning to meet the needs of the learner. Most of you have done the part where you look at diagnostics and also the initial assessments and any other learner needs. Now, we are moving on this time round to planning to meet the learner need. And one of the starter questions we used was, imagine you're going on a holiday. So what do you need to know? You do need to know the destination, and also what do you need to take with you. You do need to take some resources with you. And in the same way, when we do lesson planning, we do need to know the learning outcomes. What is it that we need to achieve, or what is it that we want the learners to know at the end of the session? Sometimes people call these ones learning outcomes, and they mix in between the learning objectives. But I trust that the learning objectives is what you plan to do specifically in a session to be able to have that learning outcome that you perceive. And most of the time when the syllabus is planned, it's planned starting with the learning outcome. That's the end, that is the destination. So start with the end in mind and then break it down to specific objectives on how you are going to do that. All of these cover the general aim. For example, in this particular Unit 401, we are planning to meet the learner needs, and that also includes the learning needs. Thank you. The resources we need are very diverse. It depends on the stage where you are at. And we have used a number of resources so far. You have used your own resources. I have also used my own resources to be able to complete initial assessments as well as other assessments that I needed. And at the same time, we do have the assessment criteria. We have now the lesson plans. We are looking at the schemes of work and all that. So you do need to have resources at each stage of the journey. In the same way, if you were to travel, you do need to know what you will take with you. Now, moving on, the general aim of Unit 401 is, like I've said, planning to meet the needs of the learner in education and training, and it has 4 learning outcomes. The main purpose of this unit is to enable you as a tutor, facilitator, assessor to agree individual learning plans with your learners, okay, or participants. And then you need to be able now to plan inclusive teaching and training programs, or rather, you need to use those approaches that will meet the learner need inclusively. So you need to consider if they have dyslexia, you need to consider if they have other learning needs, you need to consider their maths levels, their English levels, and whatever you plan has to be inclusive. And those approaches that you use, whether individual or group, they need to be inclusive in a way. So you follow the internal processes and you also follow the external processes. The internal processes are those set by your organization. The external processes are those that are set by the awarding body, including Ofsted. Therefore, you need to evaluate your own practice as you plan, as you deliver. You need to be able to evaluate each stage of the way. And in this particular one, how you plan, you need to be able to evaluate whether it's effective or not effective, and then make changes where necessary. You are also expected to include the minimum core. And when we say minimum core, that is maths, English, ICT, and any other requirement that you have been asked by either internal or external organizations. Like I said, the learning outcomes are 4 of them here. Number 1 is to be able to use initial and diagnostic assessments to agree individual learning goals with the learners. Most of you do use ILPs, individual learning plans. I also do use individual learning plans, and that's the beginning, or that's the starting point. And then be able to plan inclusive teaching and learning in accordance with internal and external requirements. We've already discussed that in brief. And then number 3, be able to implement the minimum core in planning, inclusive, and teaching and learning. Now, these are our learning outcomes. And then number 4, be able to evaluate on practice when planning inclusive teaching and learning. Like I said, this is the end goal. This is our destination. This is where we want to be able to arrive at. Now, to be able to arrive at that, there are specific assessment criteria that we can use as learning objectives. And these ones are broken down here, and you can be able to look at each one of them specifically as you go through them. So I won't be able to read them right now, but please have a look at your assessment document, and at the same time, when I send this PowerPoint later on, please have a look. As we continue, each subtitle on the slides will be covering one assessment criteria. In a way, sometimes they're mixed up together or grouped together depending on the topic that is being discussed. So here at the beginning, they could be numbered 1.1, 1.2, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 continuously, but in the actual tasks, they are mixed according to the subject or according to the theme that they are trying to assess. So please have a look at them when you have an opportunity. Like I said, they've been grouped together, and the very task number 1 in your assessment is the rationale. Rationale is the reason behind it, the reason why you're doing what you're doing. So you need to be able, number 1, to analyze your role and use of initial and diagnostic assessments in agreeing individual learning goals with the learner, and that's assessment reference 1.1. So what is the reason behind it? So for those who have covered Unit 3.1.1, you already gave me the reasons. You remember I was saying you discuss what is it that you do, how do you do it, and why do you do it. That is a rationale. That is the reason behind it. You gave me the theories also to back it up. Well done. And then explain how your own planning meets the individual needs of the learner. That, together with assessment reference 1.1, is already covered in your Unit 3.1.1 if you wrote it down clearly, so you can cross-reference that point. And then the other point is explain ways in which teaching and learning plans can be adapted to meet the individual learning needs of the learners, or the individual needs of the learner. Now, depending on the extra or the other learners needs you find, or the other learning needs that you find, you can be able to adapt the sessions. So we did discuss differentiation in our teams, and I also did send something through email with a list of other ways you can differentiate. So differentiation is what we use different ways, different methods, strategies, be it resources, be it the way we deliver. Like now, I have followed up with an audio presentation of this PowerPoint as another way of differentiating. So I had broken it down to a simplified kind of PowerPoint. Then I had left the main PowerPoint, now the one I'm using, but I followed on with an audio so that the person who may have been absent, or the person who didn't quite understand what it is that we are doing, can also find a backup here. So we need to be able to adapt sessions and session plans as we go along, depending on the learner need. And it could be individual need, or it could be a group need. So just be able to balance and have that balancing act on how to do this. We are moving on. Then the other point is identify opportunities for learners to provide feedback to inform inclusive practice. Yes, your feedback has been helping me to find different ways in which I can be able to deliver, at least to meet most of your needs in the session, and at least be able to follow up for those who need a bit of support. That is part of also being informed by you. I have given you an opportunity to be able also to speak to your managers, and they do feedback to me, and we are able to plan and replan and adapt sessions so that they can be able to meet your learner needs. Okay. Analyze ways in which minimum core elements can be demonstrated in planning inclusive teaching and learning. Again, that is another way in which you can show how you have implemented maths, you have implemented English, you have implemented ICT. Sometimes people call them differently. Yes, numeracy, literacy, and digital skills. You need to be able to show how you have implemented this in your planning and later on in your delivery. This sometimes is also looked into by looking at your own lesson plans, the ones that you have delivered and the ones that you're planning to deliver. Analyze or find ways in which you can be able to implement those, and as you deliver them, do implement those. Now, I do have some indicative content that you can use for your assignment. For example, when you analyze your role and use of initial assessments and diagnostic assessment in agreeing individual learning goals with learners, which covers criteria 1.1, you can look at, for example, your role is to look for the information for the course. Okay, you need to be able to know the current levels of knowledge of your learners and how much they understand. You need also to find about their existing knowledge and their achievements. You need to find about what motivates them to learn, or maybe what doesn't motivate them. You need to have a bit of their background. It's your role, and this was covered in unit 301, and at the same time you covered part of this in unit 311. So if you remember where you covered it clearly, just cross-reference it and tell me, I have already covered this part. Learning goals, for example, is another one that can cover assessment criteria 1.1. You need to kind of have the requirements, not kind of, you need to know the requirements of the learning program. And then you need also to be able to know what has the learner or the group signed up for. Yeah, like now when we signed up for this course, I know a group of learners, a given number, had signed up to complete the number of units, the 8 units that we are supposed to complete here, the 5 mandatory one and the 3 that are optional. And I say they're optional not because they're optional for you not to do them, but because they've been picked to complement the mandatory units. Okay, so you need also to have identified the goals of the learners. Yeah, setting up SMART goals with them in your ILPs, depending on the needs that you identified, setting with them the short-term and the long-term goals. And in particular in this class also, we have done that for our own sessions. So you do need to be able to have an understanding of your role and also to understand the learning goals. And those are some of the indicative contents that you can use. When it comes to the learner needs, explaining how your own planning meets the individual needs of the learner, then you need to recognize that we are all diverse, we are all different, we have varied ways in which we learn or understand or comprehend. So we do need to be able to use theory also to be able to back up this. You can either start looking at Kolb learning cycle, yeah, where people can be using an activity, reflecting, planning, and all that. Try to look at how different people take in information and process it, and how does that help them. Bloom's taxonomy is the other one we had a look at, so you do need also to revisit that and other learning theories to be able to understand how you can be able to meet the diversity in the way people learn. And therefore, when you plan, you can be able to meet these differences. Again, differentiation comes in here, but differentiation can also be backed up by different types of theories. So we have introduced theories to you, and please keep on looking into other theories. And one of the ones I would recommend in this particular one is Kolb learning cycle, and at the same time Bloom's taxonomy. Please have a look at that. Yeah, you are planning to provide flexible approaches to learning. You are planning to use resource-based learning. You're encouraging independent learning, and you're also putting in the perspective of the learner-centered learning, and also you're looking for opportunities where you can be able to connect learning. There are many ways you can do this, and we have briefly touched on some of the theories that can support that. Then you need to be able to explain explain ways in which teaching and planning can be adapted to meet individual needs. Like we have said already, think about the theories, think about the differences, and then what can you do to help the learner to understand better or to learn better. So we need to be able to negotiate with the individual themselves. We need to be able to use different or alternative activities. We need to be able to individualize learning plans, and also use extension activities. Sometimes we call stretch and challenge, blended learning, all sorts of ways you can. In our sessions now, we are performing team tasks. Why at this level? Because initially all the tasks that were being done were individual tasks and we needed to get started. But now, because we have all gotten started, we can be able to do group tasks better, team tasks better. We can share practice, because this is at the stage where we are planning lessons and also we are planning schemes of work. We can compare and share notes, because we need to be able to know how people do different things different way. How do they meet needs of different people? How do they do differentiation and all that? And again, I did send a link to you based on Geoff Petty, and you can still look up for more differentiation methods in this particular book, and it may give you some ideas of strategies and approaches to learning. But we will cover that a little bit more when we get to Unit 402 as well. But for getting started, you can have the basics in your lesson planning. What is it that you can use? And I did share my own, and some of you have also used some of the methods that I shared with you. Please have a look at the example lesson plans that you have already completed and the templates that we have shared. So we are continuing with the rationale. Identify opportunities. This is task A. Identify opportunities for learners to provide feedback to inform inclusive practice. So remember, I always ask you for feedback. It's important to ask your learners about the feedback. So encourage them in informal sessions, during one-to-one or in group discussions. Find out what is it that they would prefer. Find out how you can be able to support them more effectively. Yeah, you can do session reviews, you can do course reviews, you can do unit reviews. So, and use that feedback, yeah, to be able to improve in your planning and in your delivery. And this can be done formally or informally. And after you've done this, then you can be able to perform better, or you can be able to achieve the learning outcomes better once you have done that. When we were doing classroom-based learning, sometimes you could have someone represent the rest of the group. If you had a bigger group for longer sessions, then you can have one of the learners represent the rest of them to voice up their feedback, to say, okay, this is how it is. Alternatively, you can have other forms of feedback. Nowadays, we do use a lot of digital feedback to give, and then we can be able to respond to that as per the preferences of the learners. Because by the end of the day, we are planning to meet the learner need and the learning need. Brilliant. And then analyze ways in which minimum core elements can be demonstrated in planning inclusive teaching and learning. So again, we have said the minimum core, mainly maths, English, and ICT, but you can also have other core minimum core in the learning, okay? And you need to be able to record the evidence. You need to be able to record group presentation. So like team working is one of the core elements we can also include in the planning, and we are able also to plan the use of digital skills, in different ways. So the way you plan, the way you do your planning can help you to implement more, or rather to use more core minimums, right? And the core minimums you could be given by your organization, or they could be given by external bodies. It depends. So you need to be able to put this together and bring them together, and we need to be able to locate the information so that when the assessment is being marked, we can be able to see this is how it was done, this is how it was done in the lesson planning and in the lesson delivery. And some of these are also assessed via observation. So those records do help to see this is where these core minimum were implemented. Okay. Task B of this unit is to do with creating a portfolio of teaching evidence. And we have already started planning lessons, and I did ask you to plan at least 5 lessons, and at the same time get started with your schemes of work. Those two go hand in hand. Sometimes people start with the schemes of work, and out of the schemes of work they create the lesson plans. But I've also known people to start with the lesson plans and then work on the schemes of work. Whichever way that is easier for you, we would like you to get started. Since January, at least you have done more than 5 lesson plans. So if you can work on that and polish those, and then show the key elements, particularly in evaluating your sessions, how you have differentiated, how you have stretched and challenged, how you have applied the core minimum, all those things need to be now showing the the planning in an inclusive way. Okay, so devise some lesson plans. Also, show us how you conducted your initial and diagnostic assessments. Then we need to see the evidence of our schemes of work. We need to see the aims that you have from the beginning, the learning outcomes and all that. We need to show you need to show how you're going to meet them. And also, like I've said again, the minimum core elements, how you have included them in that planning. Task B continued some of the indicative content that you can put there. You can be looking at how you negotiate with your learners and how you've conducted assessments, initial, diagnostic, self-assessment, how you have conducted discussions with them, how you have recognized their learning needs and also their skills gap. We were talking about training needs analysis at the very beginning. So you need to evidence those methods that you have used. And again, there was an observation done, or rather some of you still need to be observed while you're doing either a review where you are reviewing the learning goals, with the learner from the beginning to the end. So you need to liaise with the learner and also the other team that do work with information, advice, and guidance to be able to plan lessons that will meet these learners' need. And then you need also to be able to agree and record individual learning goals with the learners. Again, this is where the ILP comes in, and any other method that is used to keep a record of these, it's very welcome. Make sure you have the evidence and it's recorded and it's very clear. Now, I won't go into the details of devising the schemes of work. Just remember, when you do that, it's to do with the curriculum requirements and then the assessment requirements, the learner requirements, the organizational requirements. All those things need to be shown within your schemes of work. And of course, they extend to the lesson plans. Curriculum, assessment, learner requirements, organizational requirements, and any other requirement that is needed. We have templates in the textbook, and if you would need other templates as well, we can be able to share that. And I trust that you're also sharing your own practices with others. When it comes to lesson plans themselves, they need to show aims and objectives. They need to show the subject area. They need to be able to show the content, the timing, the sequencing, and different types of approaches or strategies that you use, how they're linked to the assessments, and how they're linked to opportunities for minimum core as well. And also within the lesson planning, you need to show a variety of learning and teaching activities. You need to be able to show opportunities to demonstrate the practice of you as a teacher, and also a planned reflection and opportunities for feedback after the lesson. I try to do that in my own lessons. Sometimes it may seem complex, but at the end of the day, when you will be looking back and reflecting, you will see where these points had come across. Okay. Part of that in applying core elements or core minimum elements in planning and inclusive teaching and learning is, like I was saying, you can show when it comes to teaching that you had group discussions, that you had individual discussion or individual tasks, or you've had group presentation, project work, research, and all that data. You can produce that. Then when it comes to literacy, there is the reading, there is the research, there is the writing of assessments, there's the projects, any other reports that you have produced. That is part of improving on your literacy and also showing that you have also helped your learners to do the same. And part of literacy sometimes is language, where we have been using question and answers, paired work, discussions, presentations again there. Maths also can be presented in different ways. We've been doing mean, we've been presenting learner levels. They can also be presented in graphs and scales and all that. And then when we ask about the evaluation, they can also scale up. They can say 5 is the best, 1 is the least, and all that. Okay. ICT, there are many ways to do this. Different tasks nowadays that we use. We use Teams for learning, and then we use Word processing, we use researching, presenting information in PowerPoint. There's so many ways you can be able to explain how you have implemented or applied ICT tools. Okay. Now, when you've done everything, you've done the lesson planning, you've done the initial assessment. I should have started it the other way around. When you've done your initial and diagnostic assessments, all the learner needs, you have found them. Then you do your lesson planning, you do schemes of work. After you've done everything, task A and B, you need to review the effectiveness of your own practice. See the gaps that you have, which areas are best, which areas need to be improved. For the better parts, you can share good practice with others. And also for the parts that you're not doing well. Why is it that you're not doing well? Maybe it's something as basic as keeping records. Yeah, you need to note it down and be able to say, this is the area that I'm going to improve on next time. If it's to do with differentiation, maybe you've not been doing it more effectively. Again, this is the opportunity where you can review the effectiveness and then identify areas for improvement. And that will cover task C on evaluation. So what exactly do you do here? Yeah, you look at whether your programs are fit for purpose, whether you have good time management in your session planning, and of course later on session delivery, whether you're meeting the goals, whether the content is covered very well, whether you've given the learners opportunities, whether you have other opportunities to improve as well. So you do a self-evaluation, and that can be formally or informally. You can be also observed in learning walks or regular observation OTLAs. Those can be done any opportunity that you have feedback from the students or feedback from your managers or feedback from the employers. That is all part of it. Okay, you need to assess the effectiveness of achieving goals. Are the learning outcomes being met? Are you doing it within the time scale? Are they being realistic? So SMART goals, remember. Are you doing it within the time that is set? Is it effective? Every part of that program that you're doing, how effective is it? Or how can you make it more effective? Okay. The other areas you could also look at is mentoring support. Is there someone supporting you? Is there a team you're working with? And like now we have started working as part of a team because, yeah, it helps because you're able to see other people and to see how they work. So team working, team support, and also when it comes to quality assurance, yeah, verifying whether what we are doing or moderating what we are doing to make sure that we are within, yeah, the requirements, internal and external. And sometimes it's good to work with others to be able to see how they are performing their duties or how they are implementing their session plans or how they are planning the sessions and all that, and share that expertise and share that knowledge. So look at the areas that you need to improve, share the areas of your strengths. Always remember, this is part of your curriculum professional development, career professional development, sorry. It's part of career or as your own personal development. Always enter this for your own professional development at the same time for the management to be able to see that. The easiest way to do this is to take out the learning outcomes. This is what was done in this session, and then how was it broken down, and what have you learned out of that particular session, but do it just in brief and then log in the hours that you have spent in doing that. One of the other things I normally encourage students to do is to do a mini plenary of 3, 2, 1. Think about 3 skills that you have learned. Also think about 2 questions that you would like to ask, and then one of your opinions is welcome. So I've given you an opportunity to give me feedback. I have given you an opportunity to ask questions, and I've also given you an opportunity to show what it is that you are learning from this session. And if you have any other questions, they are still welcome either via any platform that you believe is easiest for you. Emails is one of the common ones I have seen people use. I also do encourage people to say what went well, what could be better, and what could be done differently. And that could be from your point of view or from my point of view. So I am looking for opportunities to be given feedback. You are also looking at the opportunities where you can develop your own practice, others, as well as areas that you can be able to look at your own position as a learner. What went well in that particular session? Were you able to pay attention? What could be better? Maybe you could have a notepad where you could be writing your keynotes. Alternatively, maybe there's something you could do differently next time. Last but not least, one of the PowerPoints I had sent had an error in these objectives. Have we met them? So you need to go back to the very objectives where we had started the journey. Have we met these objectives? Have we met the key points that will help us in the assessment criteria? Remember, I said, please have a look at these in your own free time. Of course, there is the assessment itself, that needs to be handed in. We are going to complete Unit 401 by the end of the month. Hopefully, majority of you will have completed that at the end of March. So if you have any questions or any issues, please do let me know. And when I say completed, don't worry about the lesson plans. Those ones can continually be done. So, but at least have the 5. And out of those 5, show the number of hours they have covered. Remember, we need to cover at least 30 hours of teaching practice. And we also need to cover at least 3 hours of observations. So if you can have your observations compiled together, and if you can have your lesson plans compiled together, as well as the schemes of work, we can always revisit these and sign off the Unit 401. Maybe now at the end, I don't think everybody will be signed off at the end of the month, but if you do the writing part by the end of the month, the lesson plans then can be carried forward into the next unit, which is Unit 402, and it's to do with delivery. Some of it can go even up to Unit 403, that is about assessments. As long as you have started, we can be able to move on well, very progressively. Again, if you have any questions, please do email those. And please remember to study the assessment criteria. When you are writing your assessments, I do encourage that you use PEEL. So say the point that you're going to say, explain it, use some examples or evidence in theory, and then link it to the particular subject that we are talking about at that particular time. And this time round, we are talking about planning to meet the learner's needs. That's the stage where we are at. So please do link them to that particular topic. There's a lot of references, and some of them have begun are here since we began this course. So there is quite a number of them there. Please feel free to also share some of the references that you have used yourself while you've been doing this. Otherwise, thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.